Throughout history there have been a number of strange stories as to men and women whose executions did not go as well as they could have. For example, John Babacom Lee, who was believed to have murdered his female employer, took 3 attempts at the gallows to be executed, and this still did not work. The faulty equipment meant that John Lee's sentence was changed to life imprisonment, and because of this he lived decades after his death sentence. Also, Maggie Dixon, a young Scottish lady, was hanged in Edinburgh, but later, after being placed in a coffin, she awoke from what seemingly was the clutches of death. But one of the most infamous sites of execution in England was Tyburn, a place where a triangular gallows stood that was known for taking the lives of many condemned people at one time. But following an execution in the 18th century, the man who was hanged survived his ordeal, and he was a man who awoke at the right time. Join us today to look at the brutal execution of the man that woke up after his hanging. And remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. William Duell was born in 1723, and he was just 17 when he was convicted of a horrific crime. He lived in London and was brought to trial for the brutal murder and assault of a lady named Sarah Griffin. In September 1740, Sarah, who was suffering from severe bronchitis, left London and she was returning to her family in rural Worcestershire to escape the terrible air in London. She journeyed via West London and was going to walk to the Midlands, but along the way she encountered a farmer's son in William Duell. He offered to hire Sarah a night's lodgings, and she then stayed inside a barn in Acton. As she lay down on a hay bale, Duell went to a nearby pub, and he met 5 men and boasted about Sarah being in the barn, and with this the group then began to attack her. The court reports were harrowing as to what the men subjected her to. She was also robbed before being subjected to the horrific ordeal, but William Duell was convicted of being an accessory to the crimes involving Sarah Griffin. The following day, Sarah died from a stroke, and her dead body was left bloodied and bruised by the ordeal. The trial was held at the Old Bailey, and after being found guilty, William was sentenced to death for the crimes he had committed. Duell was described as a boy of little education, and what little reading he had almost forgotten, being an obstinate boy. He was held in prison at Newgate for a while, until on the 24th of November 1740 he was taken to Tyburn, where a huge triangular gallows stood. It was on this gallows that thousands of people were condemned and executed throughout the centuries, since it was created, and accounts of executions at Tyburn show how thousands of people would flock to the site of the scaffold to witness the proceedings. The crowds on the 24th of November 1740 would have been similar to how they were previously, as on this day there were 5 executions to take place on the Tyburn Tree. On this day there was a northerly gale of wind, with rain, snow and hail, and it was not a nice day at all. Duell was to be executed with 4 other criminals, but he was taken by the executioner and was stood on top of a box or a step, before the executioner placed a noose around his neck. His death sentence was read out, and then the stool was removed, and Duell was left hanging. It was said he had been suspended from the rope for more than 50 minutes, but when he was cut down he was presumed dead, and as he was a young teenage boy, his body was transported to the Surgeon's Hall near to the Old Bailey, and it was going to be used to teach anatomy students and dissected. The body of William was taken in through the under door at street level, and he was taken up a spiral staircase and was then laid out in a passage. It was attended on by a washerwoman whose job it was to swill and wash the corpse to prepare it for the next dissection demonstration, which would take place in the anatomy theatre. But while she was doing this, she heard William Duell begin to groan for around 10 minutes, and then as he was laid on a board about to be dissected, one of the servants also noticed he had begun to breathe very slowly. As they watched on, his breath got quicker and quicker, then the anatomist bled him, and after this he revived very quickly. He could not initially respond to questions, and after his body was warmed up with wine and hot water, he then managed 2 hours later to sit up. The next morning the surgeon and the sheriff questioned Duell about what he remembered, and his execution. He claimed he did not remember his ordeal at Tyburn, but the last thing he recalled was receiving the last rites. He was then taken back to Newgate Prison where he was fed, but there was no physical side effects of the execution, and he had not a memory of it. But there was a problem, as it was said Duell was socially and legally dead, but was not medically dead, and someone with this status did not exist in Georgian society at the time. But then a week later a hearing at the Old Bailey occurred as to what were to do with him, and also whether to hang him again. If there was a problem with the rope on the gallows on the execution day, then it was common for a condemned criminal to be tied and executed using a different one. But there was a question raised as to whether God had spared William Duell, and his case remained a mystery even to the doctors. He was not scheduled for execution again, but the authorities decided to transport William for life to North America, where he lived out the rest of his life in exile in Boston, and he was reported to have died around 1805 at the age of 82. The story of William Duell is one which saw a man who was complicit in the horrific killing and assault of a young woman ultimately escape the hangman's noose. He was just 17 when he was executed in front of a crowd at Tyburn, and just before the anatomists cut him open with their scalpels, he woke up and was seen breathing. His story is one which is shocking and still remains a mystery today, and it's not known why he woke up. The knowledge of his case today has helped to save lives, as it was learned that his body's own biological defences against trauma reduced the temperature of his body, and this preserved energy and may have helped to keep his vital organs, such as his heart, beating. As he was hanged in the winter cold, this may have also contributed to his survival. But the story of William Duell is a captivating one, but also one which is rather puzzling. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.